Did you know that nearly 30% of married individuals admit to having an affair at some point in their lives? That's right, almost 1 in 3 people has crossed the line of trust, plunging into a world of secrets and lies. But what happens when those secrets spiral out of control? What happens when love turns deadly? In a quiet suburban neighborhood, where everything seems perfect on the surface, the manicured lawns, the friendly waves from neighbors, and the laughter of children playing in the street. It's a place where families thrive and dreams are built. But beneath this facade of normalcy lies a dark secret, one that will shatter lives and leave a community reeling. Meet Sarah, a devoted housewife who appears to have it all. A loving husband, 2 beautiful children, and a home filled with warmth. But behind closed doors, Sarah is fighting her own battles. She feels trapped in a life that no longer brings her joy. And then there's Jake, her stepson, a charming young man with a troubled past and a complicated relationship with his father. As their paths cross in unexpected ways, an undeniable connection forms between Sarah and Jake. At first, it seems innocent, a shared glance here, a lingering touch there. But as their bond deepens, so does the danger. What starts as a forbidden romance quickly spirals into something much darker. But here's the twist. This isn't just a story about love gone wrong. It's about betrayal that leads to murder. How could something so beautiful turn into such horror? How could 2 people who once shared laughter end up in a deadly confrontation? Stay with us as we unravel this chilling tale of passion, deception, and the ultimate betrayal, a story that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Because in this world, where trust is shattered and love becomes lethal, nothing is ever as it seems. Let's take a closer look at the characters at the heart of this gripping tale. First, we have Sarah. On the outside, she embodies the ideal housewife. Her days filled with school runs, grocery shopping, and organizing family dinners. She's the kind of woman who bakes cookies for her children's school events and volunteers at the local charity. Her friends often marvel at how she manages to keep everything together. Always smiling, always cheerful. But beneath that polished exterior lies a woman who feels increasingly isolated and unfulfilled. Sarah married Mark, a successful businessman who spends long hours at work. He provides for the family well, but his dedication to his career comes at a cost. As the months turn into years, their conversations become routine. Their intimacy fades, and Sarah finds herself longing for something more, something that ignites her spirit and makes her feel alive again. She often reminisces about her youth, those carefree days filled with laughter and adventure. Now she feels like a ghost in her own home, drifting through life without purpose. And then there's Jake. At 21 years old, he is Sarah's stepson, a young man caught in the crossfire of family dynamics. Jake has always been a bit of a rebel. He struggles with feelings of inadequacy and resentment towards his father. Mark is a hard man, expecting nothing less than perfection from his son. Jake feels like he can never measure up to his father's lofty standards. He often retreats into his world of music and art, seeking solace in creativity while grappling with his own identity. But there's something else about Jake, a depth that draws people in. He has a charisma that is hard to resist, and Sarah finds herself captivated by his energy. Their relationship is complicated. She sees him not just as a stepson, but as someone who understands her struggles in ways no one else does. They share moments of laughter and connection that blur the lines of their roles within the family. As Sarah navigates her feelings of loneliness and desire for connection, she finds herself drawn to Jake in ways she never expected. It begins innocently enough, a shared interest in music, or late-night conversations about dreams and aspirations. But soon, those innocent moments evolve into something much more intense, a bond that ignites passion, but also danger. In this seemingly perfect household, where love should flourish, tension simmers just below the surface. Sarah's heart is torn between loyalty to her husband and an undeniable attraction to his son. The stakes are rising higher with each passing day, setting the stage for a tragic unraveling that no one could foresee. Stay with us as we delve deeper into this web of emotions and secrets, where love intertwines with betrayal and trust hangs by a thread. As the days turned into weeks, the atmosphere in the house shifted. What began as innocent conversations soon morphed into something electric, something that neither Sarah nor Jake could ignore. It was a slow burn, a gradual awakening of feelings that had been buried beneath layers of routine and obligation. It started one evening when Sarah found herself alone in the kitchen, preparing dinner while Mark worked late. The aroma of garlic and herbs filled the air, but her mind was elsewhere. She felt a familiar ache of loneliness creeping in, a reminder of how disconnected she had become from her husband. Just then, Jake walked in, his presence instantly brightening the dimly lit room. He wore a faded band t-shirt and jeans that hugged his frame just right. There was something about him, his boyish charm mixed with an undeniable edge that made her heart race. "Need any help?" he asked, casually, leaning against the counter with a playful grin. Sarah felt a flutter in her chest, a mix of warmth and guilt. She shook her head, trying to dismiss the feeling. But as they chatted about their favorite bands and shared stories from their day, laughter filled the kitchen, a sound that had been missing for far too long. In that moment, Sarah felt seen and heard in a way she hadn't experienced in years. The connection between them deepened with every shared glance, every lingering smile. It was intoxicating, pulling her further into uncharted territory. Days turned into nights filled with secret exchanges. Texts sent under the cover of darkness, stolen glances during family dinners, and whispered conversations when no one else was around. The thrill of secrecy added to the allure. It was as if they were living in their own world, separate from reality. Then came the night that changed everything. It was late summer, the air was thick with warmth and anticipation. Mark had gone out with friends for a rare night off, leaving Sarah and Jake alone in the house. They settled on the couch to watch a movie, a classic romantic thriller filled with tension and desire. As the plot unfolded on screen, Sarah felt her pulse quicken, not just from the film, but from Jake's presence beside her. With every passing moment, she became acutely aware of him, the way he leaned closer during suspenseful scenes, how his arm brushed against hers, the air crackled with unspoken words and unacknowledged feelings. When their eyes met during a particularly intense moment in the film, time seemed to stand still. The world outside faded away. All that mattered was this connection, a magnetic pull that neither could resist. In an impulsive moment, driven by raw emotion, Jake leaned in closer, his breath warm against her skin. "Sarah," he whispered softly, his voice laced with longing. And just like that, everything changed. Their lips met, a tentative brush at first, before igniting into a passionate kiss that sent shockwaves through both of them. It was electric and terrifying all at once. They were crossing a line that would forever alter their lives. In that instant, all thoughts of consequences vanished. It was just them, lost in each other's embrace. But as quickly as it began, reality crashed back in like a cold wave. Panic set in as Sarah pulled away, breathless and wide-eyed. "What have we done?" she murmured. her heart racing, not just from desire, but from fear of what this meant for them both. The thrill of their secret affair became both intoxicating and suffocating. Each stolen moment felt like walking on a tightrope. One misstep could lead to disaster. Yet they were drawn together like moths to a flame, unable to resist the heat of their passion, even as it threatened to consume them. As summer faded into autumn, so did their sense of caution. They found ways to be together. Late-night drives under starlit skies, whispered conversations on the porch when everyone else was asleep. With every encounter came heightened emotions, joy mixed with guilt and exhilaration intertwined with dread. But deep down, both Sarah and Jake knew they were playing with fire. And as they danced dangerously close to the edge of destruction, they couldn't shake the feeling that their secret would eventually unravel, leaving behind nothing but ashes. As the weeks passed, the thrill of the affair began to intertwine with an undercurrent of tension. Sarah and Jake's secret was like a tightly wound spring, coiled and ready to snap at any moment. The exhilaration of their stolen moments was increasingly overshadowed by a growing sense of unease, particularly as Mark began to notice subtle changes in his wife and son. It started with small things. Mark's keen observational skills, honed from years in business, began to pick up on the nuances of their interactions. He noticed how Sarah would laugh a little too loudly at Jake's jokes, or how she would linger a moment too long when he entered a room. There was a lightness in her demeanor that hadn't been there before, a spark that seemed to flicker only in Jake's presence. Mark couldn't quite put his finger on it, but he felt an instinctual tug of suspicion gnawing at him. One evening, as they sat down for dinner, Mark casually brought up a family game night. "What do you think about inviting Jake's friends over this weekend? It could be fun," he suggested, trying to gauge Sarah's reaction. Her eyes darted toward Jake, who sat across the table, his fork frozen mid-air. "Sure," she replied, too quickly, her voice slightly shaky. Mark raised an eyebrow, but said nothing more. The tension hung thick in the air, and as they ate in silence, Mark couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. He felt like an outsider in his own home, a stranger watching a play unfold before him. The laughter that once filled their family dinners now felt forced and strained. Days turned into nights, filled with whispered conversations and nervous glances. Sarah would often retreat to her bedroom after dinner under the pretense of exhaustion, but in reality she was texting Jake or simply replaying their moments together in her mind. Each memory both a comfort and a curse. Then came the pivotal moment that would change everything. It was a rainy Saturday afternoon when Mark decided to surprise Sarah with a spontaneous outing, a chance for them to reconnect amidst the chaos of life. He had planned a day trip to the nearby vineyard where they used to spend weekends together before life got busy. He hoped it would reignite the spark between them. As he approached Sarah with the idea, he noticed her hesitation. "I'm not sure I can today," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've got so much to do around here." Mark frowned. This wasn't like her at all. He could see the conflict etched on her face, the guilt mixed with longing for someone else. "Come on," he urged gently. "Let's just get away for a bit. It'll be good for us." After some coaxing, she reluctantly agreed, but Mark could sense that something was still amiss. On arriving at the post office house, he knocked, then turned, but still nothing. As they drove through the winding country roads, rain pattering against the windshield, Mark's mind raced with unspoken questions. Why had Sarah seemed so distant lately? Why did she keep glancing at her phone? The nagging feeling of suspicion grew stronger with every mile they traveled. When they arrived at the vineyard, it was beautiful. lush green vines stretching as far as the eye could see under the grey sky. But even amidst the picturesque scenery, an invisible wall stood between them. They wandered through the rows of grapes, tasting wine and sharing forced smiles, while Mark's thoughts spiraled deeper into doubt. Then came a moment that shattered the fragile facade they had built around themselves. As they strolled hand in hand through the vineyard, Sarah's phone buzzed in her pocket, a message from Jake that read, "Can't wait to see you tonight." Mark caught sight of her reaction. Her face paled instantly as she pulled out her phone and quickly silenced it, but not before he saw the name on the screen. Jake. A cold chill ran down his spine as realization dawned on him like a dark cloud rolling in over their sunny day. "Oh, who was that?" he asked sharply, his voice laced with disbelief and hurt. Sarah froze for a moment. She looked like a deer caught in headlights, her mind racing as she scrambled for an answer that wouldn't expose their secret. "Just a friend," she stammered weakly, but Mark could see right through her lie. The tension escalated rapidly. It felt like standing on the edge of an abyss, where one wrong move could send everything crashing down. The air crackled with unspoken words, as Mark's heart raced with betrayal and confusion. This wasn't just about an affair anymore. It was about trust, the very foundation of their marriage crumbling beneath them. In that moment, everything changed. The stakes were higher than ever before. Secrets were no longer safe behind closed doors. As they stood amidst the vines, surrounded by beauty yet engulfed in turmoil, their lives hung precariously in balance. What would happen next? Would Mark confront Sarah? Would Jake's role in this tangled web be revealed? The answers loomed just out of reach, shrouded in uncertainty and danger. The tension in the household reached a boiling point. Mark could no longer ignore the signs that something was terribly wrong. The atmosphere crackled with unspoken accusations and hidden truths, and every moment spent together felt like walking on eggshells. He had sensed the distance between himself and Sarah growing, but now he felt it like a chasm, wide and unbridgeable. After their disastrous outing at the vineyard, Mark became increasingly suspicious. He couldn't shake the image of Sarah's face when she saw Jake's name on her phone. It haunted him, an echo of betrayal that rang louder with each passing day. Determined to uncover the truth, he began to watch them closely, noting their interactions, their laughter, the way they exchanged glances that lingered just a moment too long. One fateful evening, as dusk settled over their suburban neighborhood, Mark decided to confront Sarah. He could no longer live in this shadow of doubt. He needed answers. He waited until after dinner, when the kids were tucked away in bed and the house was shrouded in silence. "We need to talk," he said, his voice steady but laced with urgency. Sarah looked up from her phone, her expression shifting from casual to alarm. "What's wrong?" she asked, feigning innocence. Mark took a deep breath, gathering his thoughts. "I know something is going on between you and Jake," he stated bluntly, watching as Sarah's eyes widened in disbelief. "I saw the message on your phone." Panic washed over her face as she struggled to find words. "Mark, it's not what you think," she began, but he cut her off. "Then what is it? Because it sure looks like something." His voice rose slightly, fueled by a mix of anger and hurt. In that moment of confrontation, everything unraveled. Sarah tried to explain herself, her feelings of loneliness, her connection with Jake, but Mark's rage consumed him. The betrayal cut deeper than any knife. It felt like a physical blow. "You've been lying to me," he shouted, his voice echoing through the empty house. Just then, Jake entered the room, drawn by the commotion. He stood frozen in the doorway, Confusion etched on his face as he took in the scene, the tension palpable in the air between them. "What's going on?" he asked cautiously. Mark turned his fury toward Jake. You're the reason for this mess." The accusation hung heavy in the air as Jake's expression shifted from surprise to defiance. "This isn't just my fault," Jake shot back, his voice rising in anger. "You don't know what we've been through." The argument escalated quickly. Words became weapons as accusations flew back and forth. In that heated moment, Mark felt an overwhelming surge of rage. He couldn't bear the thought of losing everything to this betrayal. Suddenly, everything spiraled out of control. In a fit of blind fury, Mark lunged at Jake, his fists clenched tight with emotion, while Sarah screamed for them to stop. The struggle was chaotic. Furniture rattled as they grappled in the dim light of the living room. Then came a moment that would change everything. A single moment that felt like time slowed down. In the heat of the struggle, Mark reached for anything nearby to regain control. His hand closed around a heavy glass vase sitting on a side table. With one swift motion, fueled by adrenaline and rage, he swung it toward Jake. The vase shattered against Jake's skull with a sickening thud, a sound that echoed through the house like a death knell. Silence fell abruptly as both men froze. Shock replaced anger as they stared at each other in disbelief. Jake crumpled to the ground, blood pooling around him, a stark contrast against the pale carpet. Sarah's screams pierced through the stillness as she rushed to her son's side, cradling his head in her lap while frantic tears streamed down her face. "Oh my God, what have you done?" she wailed, her voice raw with horror and disbelief. Mark stood frozen at a distance, his heart racing as reality crashed down around him like a tidal wave. In those moments following the murder, chaos erupted within their once happy home. The weight of what had just happened settled heavily upon them all, an unbearable burden that would change their lives forever. As sirens wailed in the distance and lights flashed outside their windows, Mark felt an icy grip of fear tighten around his chest. This was no longer just about betrayal. It was about life and death, a tragic culmination of secrets and lies that had spiraled out of control. The aftermath was swift and unforgiving. Police arrived within minutes. Questions filled the air like smoke from a fire that could not be extinguished. Mark found himself standing there, lost and bewildered, as officers took him away for questioning, while Sarah clung desperately to Jake's lifeless body. In that harrowing moment of realization, both parents understood nothing would ever be the same again. The chaos of that fateful night quickly turned into a whirlwind of police activity. As the sirens faded into the distance, the reality of the situation began to sink in for Sarah and Mark. They were no longer just a family caught in a tragic moment. They were now at the center of a criminal investigation. The police arrived in droves, their uniforms stark against the warm glow of the porch lights. Officers cordoned off the area, their serious expressions indicating the gravity of what had transpired. Mark was taken aside, his hands cuffed behind his back, while Sarah was left in a state of shock, her mind racing as she tried to comprehend the horror unfolding around her. Detectives began their work almost immediately, interviewing neighbors who had heard the commotion. Whispers spread like wildfire through the quiet suburban streets, rumors of betrayal and violence swirling in the air. The community was stunned. They had known this family as one filled with love and laughter, not as one embroiled in such darkness. As investigators combed through the house for evidence, they found key pieces that would shape the narrative of that night. The shattered vase lay on the floor, remnants of its once elegant form scattered like broken dreams. Bloodstains marked the carpet, a grim reminder of the violence that had erupted within these walls. Detectives collected evidence with meticulous care: a bloody handkerchief found near Jake's body, Sarah's phone with messages from Jake still visible on the screen, and security footage from a neighbor's camera that captured glimpses of the confrontation through their living room window. Each piece painted a picture that was both tragic and complex. Mark was taken to the station for questioning, where detectives probed him relentlessly. "What happened that night?" one officer asked, his voice steady but firm. Mark struggled to find words amidst his turmoil. "It was an accident," he insisted, his voice trembling with emotion. "I didn't mean to hurt him." But as he spoke, doubts crept into his mind. Was it truly an accident? Or had his rage consumed him entirely? The detectives exchanged glances. They could sense there was more beneath the surface. Meanwhile, Sarah sat alone in a sterile room at the police station, her heart heavy with grief and guilt. She knew she had to tell her side of the story: how her marriage had crumbled under pressure, how her connection with Jake had spiraled out of control. But how could she explain it without implicating herself? When it was finally her turn to speak, she recounted the events leading up to that night with trembling hands and tear-filled eyes. "I never wanted any of this," she cried. "It just happened." But as she spoke, she noticed something unsettling in the detective's expressions, a flicker of skepticism that made her stomach churn. Days turned into weeks. As the investigation continued to unfold, the community buzzed with speculation about what had really happened behind closed doors. Friends and family members were interviewed. Some painted Sarah as a victim, caught in an impossible situation, while others whispered about her affair with Jake. An affair that seemed to have ignited a tragic chain of events. Then came a shocking twist. During their investigation, detectives uncovered evidence that suggested Jake had been involved in illegal activities of his own, drug use and connections to unsavory characters from his past. This revelation shifted the narrative entirely. It raised questions about whether Jake had been manipulating Sarah, or if he had been involved in something far more dangerous than anyone realized. As new details emerged, Mark's defense team began to build their case around self-defense, arguing that Mark acted out of fear for his life during a heated confrontation with Jake. But Sarah felt torn. She knew what happened that night was rooted in more than just self-defense. It was about love, twisted into betrayal and desperation. With each new piece of evidence revealed, public opinion swayed like a pendulum, one moment siding with Mark as a grieving father forced into an unimaginable situation, and the next moment condemning him as a man who let rage dictate his actions. The tension mounted as court dates approached. Both Sarah and Mark faced an uncertain future filled with questions that begged for answers. Would Mark be charged with murder? Would Sarah's affair be exposed in front of everyone? As they navigated this treacherous landscape of grief and guilt, one thing became clear: this tragedy was far from over. The truth lay buried beneath layers of emotion and deception, a truth waiting to be unearthed amidst whispers of betrayal and loss. The courtroom was packed on the first day of the trial, a somber assembly of friends, family, and curious onlookers, drawn in by the tragic story that had captivated the community. The air was thick with tension as everyone awaited the proceedings, an atmosphere charged with anticipation and dread. Mark sat at the defendant's table, his face a mask of anguish and determination. He was a man transformed by grief, his once confident demeanor now shadowed by the weight of his actions. Across the aisle, Sarah sat quietly, her heart heavy with guilt and sorrow. She had come to support Mark, but she also felt the sting of judgment from those around her. Whispers filled the room as people speculated about their relationship and the affair that had led to this moment. The trial began with the prosecution laying out their case, detailing the events of that fateful night with chilling precision. They painted a picture of a man consumed by rage, a husband who had taken matters into his own hands in a moment of blind fury. Witnesses testified about the tumultuous relationship between Sarah and Jake, emphasizing how it had spiraled out of control and ultimately ended in tragedy. As each witness took the stand, emotions ran high. Friends described Jake as a troubled young man who had struggled with his demons, but also as someone who had a bright future ahead of him, a future cut short by violence. The courtroom was filled with tears as they recounted their memories of him, painting a vivid picture of loss that resonated deeply with everyone present. Then came Sarah's turn to testify. She stepped up to the stand, her heart pounding in her chest. As she spoke about her love for Jake and the affair that had blossomed amidst her unhappiness, she felt exposed and vulnerable. "I never wanted it to end this way," she said, her voice trembling. "I loved him, but I also loved Mark. I was caught in a web of my own making." Her words hung heavily in the air. They were both a confession and an explanation. The jury listened intently as she described the emotional turmoil she had experienced, the loneliness that drove her into Jake's arms, and the guilt that consumed her afterward. But even as she spoke her truth, she could see doubt flickering in their eyes. The defense team worked tirelessly to shift perceptions, arguing that Mark acted in self-defense during a heated confrontation with Jake. They portrayed him not as a murderer, but as a father pushed to his limits, a man who had lost control in an unbearable situation. They brought forth character witnesses who spoke highly of Mark's dedication to his family, emphasizing his role as a loving husband and father. But it was Sarah's affair that loomed large over every testimony, a dark cloud casting shadows over their lives. The prosecution seized on this point relentlessly, suggesting that it was Sarah's betrayal that had ignited the tragic events leading to Jake's death. This affair was not just an emotional betrayal, it led directly to violence, they argued passionately. Public opinion began to shift like sand beneath their feet. Some viewed Mark as a victim of circumstance, an innocent man driven to desperation, while others condemned him for allowing rage to dictate his actions. The media frenzy surrounding the trial only fueled this divide. Headlines blared about love triangles and murder, sensationalizing their pain for public consumption. As days turned into weeks, emotional testimonies continued to unfold, each more heart-wrenching than the last. Friends recounted moments shared with Jake, while family members spoke about their devastation at losing him so suddenly and violently. Each story added layers to the tragedy, weaving a narrative that left everyone grappling with questions about love, loyalty, and betrayal. The jury deliberated for what felt like an eternity, a heavy silence enveloping the courtroom as everyone awaited their verdict. When they finally returned, tension crackled in the air like static electricity. The foreman stood up, clearing his throat before delivering their decision. "We find the defendant guilty of manslaughter, first convicted of murder." Gasps echoed through the room. Sarah felt her heart drop as reality crashed down around her. Mark's face fell into despair, while tears streamed down Sarah's cheeks. Each drop filled with regret for what they had lost and what lay ahead. In that moment, it became painfully clear their lives would never be the same again. The affair that had once brought them together now stood as a chasm between them, a reminder of choices made and consequences faced. As Mark was led away in handcuffs, Sarah realized that love could be both beautiful and destructive, a force capable of creating joy, but also tearing lives apart in an instant. As we draw this tragic story to a close, it's essential to reflect on the profound impact that betrayal can have on families and relationships. The tale of Sarah, Mark, and Jake serves as a haunting reminder of how quickly love can turn into something dark and destructive. What began as a search for connection and understanding spiraled into chaos, leaving behind a trail of heartbreak and loss. Betrayal is not just an act, it's a fracture that can shatter the very foundation of trust that binds relationships together. In this case, Sarah's affair with her stepson ignited a series of events that led to unimaginable consequences. It's a stark illustration of how one decision, one moment of weakness, can ripple through lives, forever altering the course of families. The emotional turmoil experienced by all involved is palpable. Mark lost not only his son, but also the woman he loved, while Sarah found herself trapped in a web of guilt and despair. Their once happy home became a battleground, where love turned to resentment and trust was replaced by suspicion. This story reminds us that the choices we make can have far-reaching effects, often in ways we cannot foresee. As we reflect on this tale, we invite you, our viewers, to consider your own thoughts on betrayal. Have you ever experienced a betrayal that changed your life? How did it affect your relationships? We encourage you to share your stories in the comments below. Your experiences matter, and by sharing them, we can foster understanding and empathy in a world that often feels divided. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the complexities of love and betrayal. Remember, every story has lessons to teach us, lessons about trust, forgiveness, and the fragility of human connections. Until next time, take care of each other. Thank you for watching this gripping tale of love, betrayal, and tragedy. If you found this story compelling, don't forget to give us a thumbs up and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your feedback means the world to us and helps us create even more engaging content. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode. We have a lot more true crime stories coming your way, each one filled with twists, turns, and shocking revelations. And speaking of shocking revelations, in our next episode, we'll dive into the chilling case of a seemingly perfect couple whose lives unravel after a mysterious disappearance. What secrets will be uncovered? You won't want to miss it. We thank you for joining us today. Remember, every story has layers waiting to be uncovered. Until next time.